Hello folks, welcome to Coding with Jess, where you code along with me while I build a thing. Um, Thanks for joining in today. Today we're going to be continuing to work on something I started on last week, which is a standoff markup demo thing. And last week, as I've kind of been building this demo, it's a way to play with this thing called standoff markup, which I'm going to explain here in a minute. But today, instead of extending the capabilities of the demo, I'm going to start by embedding that demo into a narrative. My vision for this all along has been a way for, hopefully, as a very lightweight resource that you could pass along to people who would be getting into standoff and they would learn it. So today we're going to do a little bit of writing and a little bit of coding. And that's gonna be fun. So thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time on Coding with Jess, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do 4 Pomodoros worth of work. That's 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break. So it's about 4 blocks of 30 minutes, which is just about 2 hours. And I'm basically gonna just talk out loud while I work. I'm gonna share my screen, be kind of chatting away as I'm working on this thing. I'll also be watching the YouTube chat, so if you happen to say something in the chat, I'll try to be aware of that and respond to that, so feel free to interact there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and start a Pomodoro, my good friend Voito's Pomodoro app, and our first 25 minutes has begun. So let me kind of catch you up on where we are right now. I've got this standoff markup explainer piece, and you can actually see it at standoff.jessmart.in. It occurs to me that I should probably link to that from my homepage since it's not really linked from anywhere. You can also find the GitHub repo at github.com/jessmartin. I think I pinned that to the top. I did. Okay, cool. So you can go to github.com/jessmartin, and there's my standoff explainer. That also has a link to the standoff.jessmart.in. So what the heck does this thing do? All right, right now what it does is you can come in here and type some text, and it will lay this text out in standoff format. And so there's, the way that this is represented is you can basically standoff format allows you to represent annotations of the text as spans that span from a starting character to an ending character. And this might sound like a really simple idea. Annotations with a starting character and an ending character, and that's the way you represent things like formatting, all that kind of stuff. But it has some super interesting implications, and that's why I'm working on the narrative that I'm working on. I've been working on a project that's using standoff markup since the end of January, beginning of February. So I'm fairly new to like really digging in to working on it. And it's just been really compelling to see what it's capable of. The other thing the demo does is you can actually switch to viewing this in HTML view. So you can see in HTML, we've got this strong, and then this strong is like a tag that represents bold. EM is a tag that represents italic. And then you can actually move these tags around, and it will dynamically update as you're going through it, which is pretty neat. And yeah, so then you can see how the tags shift around the text. You can also see this in markdown format, which is kind of neat. And some of the interesting things about the demo is in standoff format, I've got this thing called a comment, which is a specific type of annotation. There's no native idea of a comment in HTML. And so HTML, when I'm converting it to HTML, it just ignores it. Doesn't do anything with it. I also have the idea of an underline. Now there is an underline tag in HTML. It's not always used to represent underline. In fact, I think the U actually stands for unknown. If you go to MDN and search for underline, it's going to recommend you to the unarticulated annotation. That sounds so bizarre. The unarticulated annotation. It is an annotation that cannot be spoken. Yeah, whatever. The interesting thing is, like, in parentheses, it calls it the underline element. And so you can use it to represent underlines. You can also use it to represent spelling mistakes and other things like that. So I'm using it to represent underline in this case as sort of a native HTML tag without any CSS required. Another way to do this obviously would be wrap it in a span tag and then have some classes that style that span up as underline. But the point is, standoff and my standoff annotation, I have bold, italic, comment, and underline. HTML doesn't support comment. And so we just have bold, italic, and comment. And Markdown, or sorry, bold, italic, and underline. And Markdown does not support underline. Big surprise. This actually surprised me. I've been using Markdown for a while, and I went to look to see how you underline things in Markdown, and it turns out you can't, which is strange. There's some extensions to Markdown that support it, but Common Mark, which is sort of the common, the lowest common denominator of the way that Markdown works, or if there was a standard, it would be Common Mark, does not support underline. And so when we render this standoff set of annotations as Markdown, we only render the bold and the italic, which is pretty neat. So hey, Alan, see you in the chat, buddy. Jess, Alan says, love the comment component. I tried to do something like this with MDX. Yes, exactly. So there is no HTML native way to do this. And so what you need to leave it up to is leave it up to the presentation layer. What Alan is talking about, MDX, is a Markdown extension. It's basically like Markdown with like React and code embedded in Markdown. So MD stands for Markdown. X is like an extension that is similar to supported in the React world. And so you could like embed interactive components that have JavaScript or TypeScript backing them into a Markdown document, which is pretty cool. I've used MDX on my blog for some stuff, and we actually might use MDX today to build this article. So that's the way we might go. But the point is, standoff lets you represent lots of different kinds of markup, but it doesn't, or annotations, but it doesn't require that the whichever editor like output know what all of those things are, know how to represent all of those things. So HTML, it can be like, hey, I don't know about comments, so we just leave it out. Markdown doesn't understand underlines, so we just leave it out. And then we could have an output like the one Alan was referring to. If he had a blog that understood comments, then we could actually visually display the comments. That's just like one of the cool things about Markdown. I mean, sorry, about standoff. Some other things that this demo does, right now it stores all of the markup in the URL. So you can actually come in here and customize some things about the markup. You can like change the text, blah, blah, blah. And then you can come in and hit copy URL and then open a new browser, like send this URL to a friend, and it will show them exactly what you were just looking at. So it kind of comes across sort of as like a shareable URL driven representation where you could draw some specific markup and then share it with a friend. So that's all the demo does. What I'd like to do today is actually take this demo and embed it in some narrative. And what I'm imagining is something, and this is going to sound really, I know you're all going to be giggling in your seat. This is going to sound really ambitious, but what I'm imagining is something along the lines of what, and forgive me for not knowing how to pronounce this name, but Bartos does with his amazing explainer articles. So if you go to, these things are absolutely unbelievable, super detailed. We won't go this detailed, but this is the inspiration. If you go through this guy's website, he has the bicycle, sound, GPS, curves and surfaces, naval architecture, just all these explainer articles. And let's click into sound, for example. Actually, sound's not a good one because then I had to play sound effects. We'll do GPS. So in his articles, he has their long form. Look how long this scroll bar is, yo. Good grief, we're still talking about GPS. I mean, this is a freaking book. I mean, this has to be like 40,000 words. It's super long. But within this narrative, he actually embeds these beautiful demonstrations and simulations that teaches you about the concepts in an interactive way. So check it out. Like you can like drag it around. It's awesome. You can drag the pen around and see how that changes. I'm not sure if you can drag the red and blue thing. Anyway, so it's kind of the Andy Matuszak, Michael Nielsen, Beyond the Book, interactive explainer, young girls young woman's primer, whatever. Like there's a lot of concepts. So I want to build something like that. I'm not going to go as detailed as 40,000 words on GPS, but standoff markup deserves something like this. It doesn't exist to my knowledge, and I kind of had to cobble together different talks, reading different blog posts. Like there's just no like central resource that I could hand to a friend and say, here's what standoff is, here's why it's important, go play with it. All right, so that's what we're working on today. So I think I've set the stage now. Let's go look at what I have so far. So like I mentioned, this is going to be a little bit of a different live stream in that I'm going to be doing more writing and then coding, but there's going to be times where we're going to be taking some of the coding that we put together and building it into this article. I think one of the most important things that I'm thinking about right now is the overall narrative structure about what we want to say, and how much detail to go into in any given part. So here's what I've got so far. Let's see. I haven't read this in a couple days actually, so I'm going to go through and kind of read this out loud. Haven't done a writing live stream that I know of yet, so welcome to the first writing live stream. Text is one of the most basic primitives for computers and humans. It's delightfully simple, yet devilishly complicated. In this article, I'll walk through various ways we encode rich text on a computer and kind of edit as I go to. Introduce an uncommonly used approach called standoff markup and discuss some of the possibilities afforded by adopting a standoff approach. Great. Let's start with thinking about plain text. Take, for example, the following string of plain old text, the quick brown fox. In order to encode that text, okay, so already there's a sort of pedagogical principle that I'm looking at here, which is I want to introduce only the necessary background information to be able to get to a description of what standoff markup is without giving too much complexity, and then sort of layering on complexity once you understand what standoff markup is. So this is not a TLDR. It's not like TLDR, standoff markup is when you store the annotations separate from the plain content text. Like that's fine for some things, but the article, I want to build up to what standoff is and motivate it, but I want to give the least amount of complex background to motivate it. And so I think probably introducing ASCII here is not the right thing. So basically, in order to encode that text, we can start by simply encoding the characters as a sequence of ASCII characters. I am going to have to introduce ASCII when we talk about offsets within, there's a complexity to standoff markup, and that's around grapheme clusters. I ran into this, weeks after I had been digging into standoff, and it still kind of blows my mind. Like I know I'm going to learn more about it when I write more about it, which is exciting. One of the reasons to write is to learn, right? Clear writing is clear thinking. So I'm looking forward to that. So we will need to introduce ASCII characters, but I think I can do it later. I think what we'll do is just say like, look, you open up a text editor, save the quick brown fox to a text file, open it up in any text editor, and it's the same text, right? That is plain text. Under the hood, it's actually ASCII characters. Actually, no, it's UTF-8, right? Like there's like character encodings that are mapping those characters onto a either a hexadecimal or octal, not octal. Decimal code character number. So we'll get to that, but not now. So I think I'm going to move this down. Boom. And let's just put it down here. Let's see. So at some point we'll basically say like, we'll go back to it and say, hey, and remember how I said you could like store these characters? Well, it turns out they aren't actual characters. They're numbers which map to a character. It's like a giant lookup table where like 65 represents lowercase a. All right, so if we skip ASCII, what do? So let's go start with thinking about plain text. Take for example the following string of plain old text. I may actually have, yeah, okay. Let's keep going. Most of us are used to being able to add formatting to our text, like bold, italic, and underline. And underline is not, I think I'm going to leave that example. Well, I mean, we could definitely include it in here. How might we represent the formatting of those characters? maybe we like say here, open up a text editor. Like text edit or VS Code or Sublime. Or maybe I should embed one here. Could embed a text editor. Embed a plain text editor right here. I'm not sure. And type in that. What I want to hit on here is that plain text is incredibly portable. This is really, really important because one of the things we're going to talk about with standoff is it has both the advantage of allowing for an being sort of a central point of interchange where you can write in many different formats, save those formats as standoff, and then write those standoff formats back to another format. You can convert from the standoff format to many other formats. So it could be an interchange format, but plain text is like phenomenal for interchange. And so I want to hit that kind of from the beginning and then basically motivate that like plain text is awesome. You can like pass that around, wonderful. But as soon as you start adding rich text, what do you do? And then give the different options there. And then we can talk about why counterintuitively, it might be that standoff annotations rather than markdown, because your first thought is probably markdown or something like that, HTML. We can talk about why counterintuitively standoff might be a better approach for interchange purposes. So let's go ahead and like motivate that from the beginning here. Open up a text editor like tscope, type in that phrase and save it. You can now open that text file in any other text editor and see the same result. Now the thing that I'm ignoring here is line ending differences. I'm not even going to put it in the text. Windows, Unix, and Macintosh used to have different formats for line endings. I think this is pretty much normalized these days, but you might run into it depending on which editor you're saving from and which editor you're opening it in. All right, but most of us are used to being able to add formatting to our text like bold, italic, and underline. How might we represent the formatting of those characters? What do I have here? Separate considerations, meaning what is true of this thing versus presentation. How should it look? Not sure what that is. I'm going to put that down. Move that as like a scrap down here. What I usually do when I'm writing is I usually have a hard line here, and then I'll have like a scrap pile. Things that I want to go back to that I'm not currently using. All right, so there are three methods, three approaches we might broadly, or three broad approaches we might consider. Broad approaches. So the first is we can embed the formatting into the plain text itself. On Wikipedia page, the Wikipedia page is actually pretty good for this. Wikipedia markup language. It calls that procedural markup, I think. Did I call it the right thing? I did. Okay. I'm not sure I'm going to use this term because I find it's kind of confusing, and I do appreciate how Bartos's articles only introduce concepts as necessary. Like it doesn't use jargon for the sake of jargon. But yeah, this would be procedural markup where you embed it alongside it. You could embed the text in a data structure that encodes the formatting. You could store or you could take the the standoff approach, which is store the formatting in a separate data structure while leaving the plain text untouched. Now, I'm not sure yet if I want to enumerate all three of these and then go into them, but let's, I probably am going to enumerate them one by one and explain them one by one with an interactive explainer. So an example of embedding the formatting into the text itself would be Markdown. If we wanted to add some bold and italic to the quick brown fox, we could use Markdown like so. What about embedding the text in a data structure? This is basically how HTML works. So then we've got the quick brown fox. Again, you could also think of the HTML and the Markdown as a tree. And this, I think I want to do some sort of interactive tree visualization here. Yeah, and I even had this. Try dragging around the italic and bold styles to see how the tree changes. Hey, Horatio. Thanks for tuning in, bud. Horatio's got a really cool product called Mentor, and they're using standoff markup, so we've been having some good conversations around it. So, yeah, this, you could also think of the HTML and the Markdown as a tree. So I think remember what I was saying about like the pedagogy of the article here. We only want to introduce concepts if later on we're going to use those concepts to motivate our end sort of, here's how standoff is different. So I think the tree representation is also something that we'll want to get to because standoff inherently breaks that hierarchical or tree-based structure. And that is really good because a tree has certain like restrictions about how it has to be ordered, right? You actually have to have nodes that flow underneath they all have to have a parent, all that kind of stuff. And standoff can work that way, but doesn't have to. So if we had this visualization, maybe we could work on that first. But let's keep going until the end of what I have written so far. So Markdown may look less complicated than HTML, but Markdown is also inherently a tree-based structure. Markdown is parsed as a tree. Try changing this Markdown file and watch how the tree changes. Okay, cool. So I don't need to reference it here. Delete to that. Which brings us to the third approach. Store the formatting instructions separate from the plain text. In this case, we'll need to use, each of the formatting instructions can be represented as and this is an important term that we'll have to decide what to use, and I'm not sure what the right one is here. Span, annotation, something. So yeah, annotation seems, yeah, I'm not sure. Like, this is, again, trying to keep the complexity low while you get them interested. In this case, each of the formatting instructions can be represented, can be represented as a span with a starting index and an ending index. That's not real clear. Specific character. Range. I like that better. Thank you, Horatio. I didn't like using span because it has that HTML tag connotation, and I don't want to confuse people that if they are familiar with, yeah, as a range that begins with a specific character and ends with a character. The plain text remains untouched, and we have a list of ranges, like so. And so I think that at this point we could actually embed the visualizer here, and let me reset this to, ooh, the concept of positions. Yeah, so Horatio, the complexity here is, do you do the the complexity around positions versus ranges is, positions versus like starting character, ending character, is we're going to need to eventually say, one of the things that you have to get right with annotation, or sorry, with standoff is, do you do the spaces between characters, or do the characters themselves? And this is not something that I have fully grokked. I think it's supposed to be the spaces between characters. That's the way that @JSON does it. And it's a complexity that we'll need to explain, but I don't really go into it here. Like I basically say, like in this demo that I built, I basically assume that like it starts before this character and ends before this other character, which is kind of like the spaces between. So I think this is something that, like, once we've done the very brief explanation of it, then we can introduce that complexity of like, and I think where this plate really gets important is what I was talking about earlier of explaining grapheme clusters of like the fact that it's not that characters are not all the same width, and that's where that's a pretty important concept to explain, but I don't want to explain yet at this point in the article. So I think the article would be something like this, and this is like this is a draft, right? Like we should turn this into a rendered version soon. Yeah, in your example, you can mention the character number defines the start position of each character. Yeah. So now we have this list of ranges, bold and italic. I want to use the same exact example that they use up here. So the quick brown fox. And so what we've done so far in the article is we've said, look, there's plain text, the quick brown fox. Then we said, look, there's 3 different ways which you might add rich text to this. Like we're all like really, really used to having rich text. Like it would be baffling to have a text editor and not be able to do things like bold and italic. But have you ever thought about how those things are represented? Well, let's think about it. There's 3 different ways. We could embed the formatting into the plain text itself, which is Markdown. We could embed the text in a data structure that encodes the formatting there, and then we could store the formatting in a separate data structure while leaving the plain text untouched. There is another way, I guess. Well, so the most familiar embedding the text in a data structure is HTML, but you could also argue that PDF does that. You could argue that RTF does that, that it basically like puts it into like this binary representation and it becomes a file formatted. That's something. And Horatio is asking me, the explainers are awesome. Is this something part of your job, or are you doing this because you love standoff? It's a good question. I'm just doing this because I love standoff. Yeah, I got, so this is the end of our first Pomodoro. So I'll answer Horatio's question and then I'll take a 5-minute break and be back to do Pomodoro number 2. So yeah, I started using playing with standoff back in January, and I had known about it actually for the last several years from getting exposed to about @JSON. And at the time, it seemed like a really interesting opportunity for interchange, and I kind of saw that use case for standoff and was really big on sort of promoting that. But it was difficult to promote. Like there's not a clear explainer for why it matters. And I don't think I even understood a fraction of why it mattered. When in January, I started working on a project that I'll be able to say more about in the future, but working with a company that's building a custom tablet for reading. And as I was working with that company, helping them design their data structures and their synchronization layer, it occurred to me that like standoff was the right way to represent this. Like they wanted to be able to annotate reading, and there was a bunch of different, all of the use cases ported towards standoff. And as we dug into like all the other options, and as we started playing out what you could do with standoff, it really became clear to me like how powerful standoff-based markup was. But 2 things. One, was very difficult for me to communicate to others why it was so powerful. And there wasn't, like I said, there's no clear explainer on how. There's a couple of great talks out there, but there's no clear explainer on like what it is, why it's powerful. And then 2, I don't know that I fully understand yet, like how powerful it is. So the reason I'm working on this is, 1, I think this is like sort of a missing primitive of text encoding that we have just overlooked while it's in plain sight. Like people gripe all the time about Markdown and the limitations and the frustrations of dealing with PDF and HTML and all of these different things and not having formats that are long-lived. I mean, think about all the debates around like file formats and stuff like that. And it seems like there's an obvious answer that's in plain sight that many people are overlooking. So I wanted to kind of shine some light on standoff, was one reason to work on this. And then the other was, I want to write about it so that I better understand it. I feel like as I dive into trying to explain it, to make it simple, to make it clear, to build examples that show off the power of it, I'll have a better idea of how powerful it is. And maybe it's not as great as I think right now. But I'll learn that in this process. So that's why I'm working on this. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're at the end of Pomodoro number 1. So we've got another 90 minutes of this, if you can stomach even a few more minutes and hang out. I'd love to see you when I get back from the break. Talk to you soon. All right, welcome back to Coding with Jess. We are about to start Pomodoro number 2 of 4, which means that we're about 30 minutes into this working session, and I'm about to jump back into writing our standoff explainer. And yeah, I'll go ahead and start the timer for 25 minutes, and we will take another 25 minutes and then take another 5-minute break. So kind of the point I'm at in the article right now is I have a very high level, simple article that introduces plain text, rich text, or like you need to format text, and then introduces 3 different ways that you might embed or represent rich text formatting into plain text. So the question is where to go next. We introduced Markdown, or just like these sort of embed the formatting marks into the content itself. Some other examples of this would be like LaTeX and stuff like that. You could embed it in a data structure, which is how HTML works, but that's also how RTF, PDF, all of those things work. And then we talk about standoff itself, where we show the different ranges and we have like this interactive explainer. Question is where to go from there. So I was reading back, I left myself a voice note, which is I use this little tool called Whisper Memos to basically it wires up the like Whisper GPT thing to your phone, and then lets you receive it as an email. Super easy to use. A friend of mine worked on it. And so I was using Whisper to talk about, basically to talk out loud about my talk track for this. And where I went here is, let me see. So here's an example of standoff, all formatting the same way. All right, so what next? What we could do next is we could introduce something like I introduced at the very beginning of this call, where I talked about how underline as an annotation has no representation in Markdown. Similarly, like there's a representation in HTML, but it's not kind of a non-standard way of doing it, is like wrapping it in the U tag. And so we could introduce the idea of interchange at this point and just say, look, basically the argument we would be making is that standoff is a superset of all other representations. In other words, anything you can do in HTML, anything you can do in Markdown, you can also do in standoff. And then once we've made that argument, I think the next step in the article would be, and look what else you can do with standoff that you can't do with HTML and Markdown. Because I think people are so used to HTML, Markdown, other formatting structures like that. You need to show, I think, equivalence first, and then make the argument for a superset of like, there's a huge range of possibilities of things that you can do with standoff. At least that's my thinking anyway. So let's jump over here. What if we stored underline in the standoff style and then treated HTML and markups? In that case, ... So I think composability. Can you say more about that? Horatio is saying composability is one of the most important ones for me in terms of, I think he's saying superset capabilities of standoff that are not present in HTML and Markdown. Standoff for HTML is very important. Yeah. I think the argument we're making is standoff is the ultimate interchange or universal format. We'll want to make this argument implicitly rather than explicitly, because if you make it explicitly, it will trigger people's gag reflex. Like, right, they've heard forever that like one file format to rule them all, right? Like there's the XKCD file formats. No. Where is it? File extensions. No, not that one. Standards, here we go. Yeah. Situation, there are 14 competing standards. 14? Ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use case. Yeah. Situation, 15 competing standards. So we want to kind of like stated implicitly that like, look, standoff can do this, without saying the sentence, one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah, Horatio says maybe one client could treat one particular standoff one way and another client does more complex stuff with it. Also, it does let you actually read the content without any formatting or parsing needed. Yeah, those are two really important things. And I completely agree. Like, one way to show it off. So this is actually the case with the product that I'm working on. They have both a tablet version and a web version. And when you're reading the tablet version, there's a certain ergonomics and form factor, certain things you'd want in that client experience that would be different in HTML or on the web, sorry, when you're using it on a desktop or a laptop. And so having different clients that represent the standoff different way would be really powerful. I'm gonna write that down as a potential thing to go to next. Different clients that render the standoff in different ways. Yes, and then the other advantage that Horatio is mentioning, and I'm just going to make a note here and we'll come back to, standoff doesn't touch the plain text. This allows you to read the underlying, the unformatted content. Even if the client doesn't know how to render the annotations. I think where we're at on today's work session, I think I'd like to dive into building some of these early demos and maybe getting this very basic outline into a working article and go from there. I don't know that I'm going to be able to write very effectively. I kind of have like a writing brain and a coding brain, and I'm noticing that for whatever reason, my coding brain is very active right now. My writing brain is not as active. So I might try to like beef up the draft while not on a live stream. And for right now, there's some stuff from like a coding or implementation standpoint that we can do today. And while I'm in sort of coding brain, okay, let's do it. Okay, so the standoff repo that I have right now, the one that I linked to on GitHub, right now it only has a single page to it, and that page is this. Let's bump this over here and bring this forward. Here's localhost. I'm going to shrink this down by 1 so it fits a little better. Refresh to get like a fresh set of annotations. We'll remove that. Great. So we have our basic annotation here. What I think I'd like to do is just add another route that can be our article. And then we'll eventually promote that article sort of to the main route. So let's go ahead and add a new folder here and call it article. This is SvelteKit, so it has file-based routing. I'm going to do pluspage.svelte. That's going to give me a hello world article that should now have something at localhost 5173/article. Not that, /article. Yep, there we go, hello world. So now we have a basic article. What I'll probably want to do, I'm probably going to want to do most of my writing in Markdown, and then Markdown, ironically, I'll probably want to do most of my writing in Markdown format and then have that render to HTML. So I've done that on another SvelteKit project of mine. I think GitHub, Jess Martin, Sociotechnica, I think it's done that way. Or wait, did I move Sociotechnica to its own organization? Oh, I think it's under Sociotechnica site. I bet there's still a redirect here. I did move this to its own org. Hey, there's a redirect. Sweet. Yes, and let's go to package.json and make sure that this is actually a SvelteKit site. It is. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we want to use MDX. And let's see how we did it here. Source, routes, the open source article, I think, is one example of it. So here's one. No, this one's written in HTML. Let's see. About. Nope. Protocols, maybe. Here we go. Sweet. So script import svelte markdown. Great. So this website is sociotechnica.org, and you can go to driving protocol adoption. This article right here is generated from Markdown. So if I go here, here's how I ended up doing that. I used svelte markdown. Oh, but I defined it in the script block. That's going to be kind of weird. I suppose I could store the markdown in its separate file and then import it here using SvelteKit's imports. Well, let's try setting that up. So Sociotechnica, go look at the packages JSON real quick to see markdown. All right, and then there's that MDSVEX. Markdown preprocessor. Yep. MDX for Svelte. Yep. So that, Alan, we are going to be using MDX, which you mentioned earlier, for this. Allows you to try Svelte components. Allows you to use Svelte components in your Markdown or Markdown in your Svelte components. That's kind of cool. Yeah, because I'd really like to. Svelte and Markdown. Yes, this is what I would like. Is I'd really like to write in Markdown and then embed Svelte components, which I can work on outside of that main Markdown article, and then bring in as components. So how do I get started with this? Svelte extensions would be SVX. Horatio asks, where's the standoff editor here? That's the dream. Yeah, so my goal with this article is explicitly to not build an editor. Like what I'm thinking about, like, big picture structure for the article is, after we've introduced, I'm gonna switch to my face real quick for a second. I just gotta remember to go back to the desktop before I start typing again. What I'm thinking big picture structure, actually, let me write this out on the whiteboard because that might be helpful. So it's sort of plain text, and then I want to introduce rich text at the high level, and then, like, you know, the 3 different ways to do it, the last of them being standoff. And then after that, I want to talk about, like, some of the advantages of standoff, like show off some of the things that it can do. And then what I want to do from there is, like, what about line breaks? Slash blocks, because I think this is a really important one that people get hung up on, and that I got hung up on when I was exploring standoff markup, is how do you represent things like paragraphs? How do you represent block-like structure? And how do you weave together standoff and blocks? And so I think there we would start, like, really simply with motivating, like, this is a new line character. If you embed this into plain text, you get a new line. But there's other ways of representing things, like blocks as annotations. So that would be one. And then the other one that I want to get to is, and I wouldn't call them this unless we absolutely need to, but graphene clusters is the technical term, but basically the idea of, like, emojis and not everything is a single character. This is too wide as an emoji, and so we have to handle that. Our offsets have to take into account the fact that not all characters are the same width. And finally, let's see. So we've got plain text, rich text. We've got advantages of standoff. This is where we could like really show like the multiple clients. I'm interested in doing like a multi-user application where like each different user has a different set of annotations that is unique to them. Grapheme clusters, line breaks, blocks. What was the other like really important topic? Oh, yes. What about hierarchical content? And what I mean by that is lists, tables, and I think those are the two big ones. Lists and tables. Yeah. So there's different kinds of annotations. Like, how would you represent lists and tables as annotations? Do you just embed those things? Media. Oh, medium's a really good one. Images, annotations, and text. Hey, Adam. Welcome. Ooh, Swix kit. I might have to look into that. So then, yeah. So hierarchical content is really important, and then media, yeah, is another one that Horatio mentioned. So, man, there's a lot to get to here, and what I'd love to do with the article itself is that as they're reading through the article, no matter how far you get something. You don't have to get all the way to the end to get a benefit out of it. I've definitely found this to be true with Bartos's articles around like GPS and sound and all that kind of stuff, is that like I learned something just by reading the first 10% of the article. I don't have to finish them to like get everything out of it. And that's what I'm hoping to do here, is that like at each stage you're kind of motivating more and more of the problems and that kind of stuff. This will also allow me to like release the article incrementally, because you can guess from looking at this, those of you who are familiar with standoff markup, that this sucker's getting long. Like, this is a really long article once you start like introducing this. And some of this stuff is like not entirely known how to do it. I mean, obviously another topic would be like CRDTs. So this is paratext, real-time editing, and like, why is that better? I don't know. That feels like another article entirely. So anyway, that is what I'm hoping to get through. So back to my desktop here. Okay, so let's, Alan mentioned Swix kit. I'm probably just going to use MDSVEX because I've had luck with that in the past. And we'll get this thing started. As this doesn't, these aren't great docs though. Like, what? How do I get started? I just want a simple like get started with MDSVEX thing. I'm on the docs page. Use. Here we go. Oh wow. Okay, it was a long. It scrolls down. I didn't even notice that. Okay. Oh, that's kind of like a cheat sheet up here at the top. Interesting. Yeah. Feedback for the MDSVEX guy. Like, I did not notice that. I needed to scroll down. All right. Perfect. So here's an example of, yeah, I get a script block at the top, just like most SvelteKit files. Interesting that it's using the HAST ecosystem, Remark unified ecosystem to do the transformation into from Markdown to HTML. Side note of, I've thought about maybe the unified ecosystem needing a Markdown format, a standoff format. Yeah, and this is, Horatio and I've talked about this a little bit. Horatio actually uses HAST as well for some of their stuff. All right, so use it, two named exports from MDSVEX, whatever, import. Goodness. I'm having trouble following these docs. All right, well, let's just do this. npm save dev MDSVEX. Ah, okay. Define it as a plugin. Got it. Um, Not sure why it's mentioning rollup and like this should be in Vite, I think. These docs might be out of date, not up to date with like SvelteKit 1.0. Let's jump over here to this guy. I think this is in our Svelte config. Yeah, here we go. What? Am I looking at the right thing? Oh, here we go. Yeah, so then in the Vite config file, default divine config, plugins, Svelte kit. Let's try adding another plugin called Svelte. I think this does not look right to me. My spidey sense is going off. But we'll go a little further down this road and then see. I don't want to do. Oh, I need to add to the extensions .svx. I wonder if I can. Yeah, I wonder if I can extend this. .svx. Pre-process. Yeah, this does not look right. Let me bail on that. MDS Vex SvelteKit. I think this is the website that I used. There was a website that I followed when I was setting this up. This one's from 2023. Let's see if this has some Google juice that can quickly help me out. All right. Oh, you do need an mdsvex.config. Okay. So let's remove all the changes here. Go back to start, new file, mdsvex.config.js. Not sure what the Smarty Pants Dash's old school is, but I'll find out in a second. All right, next we will import it in our Svelte config. Okay, we were just editing the Svelte config piece. We already have adapter auto. We have the regular pre-process. Import those two. All right. Did do the thing, right? Package. MDSFX. There it is. All right, so I did install it. Great. All right, then back over here to our Svelte config. Oh, it's because they're not used. Yeah, got it. Yes. Okay, so then inside the config variable, we want to set the extensions. The autocompleter like picked this up and added the arrow from the other arrows here. It's like, hey, you seem to like arrows at the end of lines with comments, so I'm going to add it as well. Thanks, Copilot. I appreciate you trying to be all consistent with the coding style in this file. There we go. MDS6 config, got those. Now our pre-process, hopefully this still works with Vite pre-process. got me a little worried. Preprocess is not defined. Let's call it beat preprocess. All right, let's go. Let's see if we go. We're gonna go for 5 more minutes here and see if we can get the MDSVEX actually compiling, and then I'll take a break. Kit adapter. There we go. Great. Each post is a markdown file and lives in source lib posts. All right. So in this case, we would do it in routes article, and we create a new file called article, or maybe index.md. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the name of it. I'm going to remove the page svelte file to avoid confusion here. Although he has his in source lib. That doesn't seem right to me. Or is there anything in here specifying source lib? Get all posts and metadata, map over that. Okay, so here's his source lib server, create a function. Aha, we need to get the post data rendered on the posts page. So he's doing the imports. So this is a a post.ts file. So this is a file that executes on the server before the page is loaded. And looks like before the page is loaded, he's reading in these post objects from source lib post, which is why he can store them there. He's not taking advantage of, here's the routing. Sorry, he's not taking advantage of SvelteKit's routing here. I mean, I guess that's fine because the pages themselves are markdown format and are going to need to be run through the, but I thought that was the whole point of getting the preprocessor working. Alan, you're making me want to like go jump out and bail on this and look at SwixKit, but I don't want to. Ultimately, I'd rather not adopt it, a whole new thing. Let's go to another website real quick. Googling is like most of what programmers do, by the way, in case you haven't learned that yet. Adding to SvelteKit project, yeah, we add the extensions. We add this to the preprocess attribute. Yep, all good there. Adding a blog layout, fetching the posts. Hey, source routes blog. All right, so he just threw this thing straight in source routes. So we maybe routes/articles is working. Looks like we need to start the server. npm install, make sure everything's installed. npm run dev. Maybe it just works. That would be wonderful. 404 not found. Article. All right, it doesn't like that. What did he do differently here? Did he name it? He gave it a name, foo-bar. So maybe I need to say actually articles/index. Nope, doesn't work either. What is he doing to make that work? So he's got these things that are, just because they're stored in source routes though, doesn't mean that that's the way he's actually rendering them out. The way the latest version is, you no longer need to use script context equals module. That's correct. Use the function in their own file. Yep. So he's doing something similar. He has this index.js file is actually running. I mean, this isn't evil. This isn't horrible. I could have a single page.ts file here plus page.ts file. And then this could be responsible for hello world. When I go to article now, get a 500, but I should get a hello world outputted. Oop. Huh. Doesn't like, there's probably some necessary return type from plus page.ts files. So but it is getting loaded, is it? Not sure. All right, well, let me jump back over here real quick. List view. So in his case, his file does this. Yeah, I probably should. All right. Cool. It has been 1 hour that we've been cranking on this. We've made some, we've extended our article a little bit to make it a little nicer and to kind of tell this narrative that we want to tell. Now we're working on bringing that article into a markdown file where we can start embedding different components. And so our goal right now is that we would get the article with that like standoff explainer component embedded into some like markdown, and that provides sort of our writing loop where we can actually write some markdown. I can embed a SvelteKit component in that markdown and have that be interactive. So hopefully in this, I'm going to take a 5-minute break and come back in 5, and we'll have 1 more hour of working on this. And yeah, I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. Hey folks, welcome back to Coding with Jess, where you code along with me while I build a thing. Today we're working on building an explainer for standoff markup. So far we've done a little bit of working on our draft, and we're working on getting the a SvelteKit application where we can write Markdown as well as embed SvelteKit components into that Markdown so that we can have this sort of format for a dynamic explainer article. So that's what we'll be doing. This Pomodoro, we're 1 hour into a 2-hour working session. So got 2 more Pomodoros, which is like a 25-minute work block with a 5-minute break coming up. So we're gonna go ahead and start the next Pomodoro now, 25 more minutes on the clock, and see if we can get this done. Fortunately, during the break, instead of walking outside into the beautiful air, as I should have probably done, I Googled around until I found the blog posts that I originally used for setting up SvelteKit and MDSVex and all that kind of stuff, and I found the solution that I was looking for. So let's get that working now. So the short answer here is we can have a nice little markdown file here. So we'll call this article.md, but we will also need let me delete the index.md, doesn't really matter. Hello world will be our article thing. We're going to need a page.ts file and a page.svelte file plus page.svelte. And I was just reading up, there is a GitHub issue out there for MDSVex to not need all of this boilerplate with the new SvelteKit routing system, but my suspicions were correct that with the SvelteKit routing system, you have to do a little bit more work than I would necessarily like. Instead of a get function, we're going to need a load function. You can kind of see it over here on the left. I'm going to go ahead and just copy it in. We will not be parameterizing the route. There will only be one thing that we will load, and so I'm just going to go ahead and replace the parameterized route with article.md. So we're going to import that file. It's interesting. I wonder if this import works differently. This is over here on the left is a JavaScript example. Over here on the right is a TypeScript example. I wonder if the import works differently if it's a JavaScript versus TypeScript example, but I guess we'll find out here in a second. We'll get the const title and data. Now that would be metadata that we get from the top of the file. I'm just going to replace, we're going to leave the metadata out for now, default. Place this with article, and then we will return the content only for now. And then on the page.svelte file, scroll down this a little bit, we're going to need to do an export script type, or sorry, lang equals ts is our thing that we're doing here. And export let data is a way that we get that the results of that load function, and then we'll wrap this thing in an article. Wow, that's weird. That svelte component with what? That doesn't look right to me either. I'll throw it in here for now, but it doesn't feel right to me. Okay, let's see what we get when we go to article. Sure enough, a 500 error. Let me jump over here. Failed to load source routes article.md. Oh, yeah. One too many dots, people. One too many dots. When I was looking at the page TS. There we go. Hello world. Boom. All right, so we have a markdown file that's now rendering as an article. Sweet. I'm glad that only took 4 minutes, 3.5 minutes once we got it working. So now I can sort of like actively write in this markdown file. Where did it go? Article.md. In fact, we can come over to Obsidian and grab the text that we have right now and copy it and drop it in here, and then save, and it should reload. And it does. Very cool. Now, the downside of this is that this is rendering out, we're going to have to customize these tags as we, um, so we're getting this rendered to HTML, which is wonderful. But we have to customize the style on these tags, and we will not be able to do that with Tailwind. So there's two ways to do that I'm aware of. One is, let me see. I really want to use Tailwind, and the other way is to use SvelteKit. No, not SvelteKit. Tailwind typography, which gives you a default set of styles for articles. Look something like this. And maybe this is the best way to do it, that we actually just use Tailwind typography and then maybe do some customization using CSS. That's certainly the way that I've done it on other websites. And, you know, in the interest of getting this working quickly, let's do Tailwind typography. And we'll go from there. So did I install Tailwind typography already? Yes, I did. Perfect. So it's already installed. So to use it, it's actually pretty straightforward. We just come in here and say class equals, I think it's class article, if I remember correctly. No, what is, go back to, yes, leave those changes. Prose, that's what it is. Change word prose. Did not like that. Quite certain. Oh, I probably didn't do the require in Tailwind config. Tailwind config. No, there's the plugins. It's definitely required. Hmm. Well, let's test this out manually by throwing in a H1 and seeing if that, so it's straight up not working. This H1 should have some styles on it because it's class prose. What am I doing? What did I miss here? Go restart the, boom. All right, there we go. For whatever reason, restarting worked. I wonder if there was a version issue or something. So I did a reinstall, npm install. Nope. Installed the same version of, like, we would see a little green tick in the corner here. So just starting and stopping the server, of course, because computers solved the problem. All right, great. Well, in any case, we now have a markdown file that is appropriately formatted, and then we can start embedding our visualization and playing with it live, which should be pretty fun. So let's go over here and let's see, close that config, close this sidebar here, close that. We can take that testing out. We now have that. Let's give this article like a real title. I don't know what this standoff markup. Let's call it that for now. Sweet. See the auto reload happening on there on the left. I think we're at a good point to check in. We've got the article working. So git add dot. Embed article using Markdown. Now, very next thing is that okay. No, sorry, like thinking through how this might work. So now we need to find out if we're going to get like, do I get a script tag at the top here? How does this work? Script. Let's try that. Pull up the console. Yeah. So I can now put a script tag at the top, and I think that's working because of MDSVex. I'm not sure. Get the script tag at the top of the article. Let's go ahead and try to refactor our code to pull this visualization out into a separate component that we can then import. All right. Let's see. So I haven't done a lot actually with SvelteKit components, so this will be interesting. Code is right now a bit of a mess. I was working on this project for the Handmade Jam this weekend and ended up submitting for that, which was pretty fun. You can see a little bit of my progress over here on the stand-up markup explainer as I was going through and working on it. But I was definitely racing towards getting things done for the jam and not trying to like structure the code in a nice way. So we're probably going to need to do some refactoring here. Wrap, top of word wrap. All right. Let's see. So a bunch of this code can get pulled into I wonder if we, all right. Build and deploy, advanced. This has got to be under Svelte. Bindings, stores, transitions, additions, component composition. Here we go. Import box from that. And what does box look like? Oh, interesting. So it by default exports its content. Like there's no need to define the export. So then the implication there would be if I put, and I guess like where's this, does anybody know where you should put components in SvelteKit? Anyway, let's see, standoff. I'll make a file here, standoff-visualizer.svelte. Let's just test this out. Script lang equals ts sup and h1 user. All right, and then I should be able to import that in from $lib / standoff visualizer. And then I guess put it just right at the top, standoff visualizer. Internal server error, so that didn't like that. Could be my import is not storing that there. Let's go over to this, see if it gives us any indication of what's wrong here. Failed to load source lib stand-up visualizer. Do I need to put .svelte on the end? Let's go over to the, oh, I do. Silly. Oh, and it looks like by the convention is to capitalize it, so let's do that. Boop, boop. Capitalized. saved. All right, and over here to, there you are. Cool. I like that. I hadn't done a lot with svelte components because I haven't decomposed a lot of my prototypes into individual components and just stored them all on a single page svelte file. But this will be handy. So I can actually just take everything in here for now and just blast it into this thing, and then we should end up with it at the top. Nice. We do. Cool. So how do we want to do this? This is great. Like, I'm excited now that I can actually see this in context. One thing I am going to do real quick is do a text center here. No, not that. Margin 0 or margin X auto. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I wanted to center column adjust this. And then now that it's embedded in the article itself, I can bring it all the way down to the place where I think I'm going to use it. So right here, I get the visualizer down here. Cool. So a couple things. We should go ahead and edit this thing on the fly. We don't need the switcher at all. This guy, we can just show the content here. So let's knock off that switcher, that toggler thingy. Markup toggle, go away. Yeah, the markup toggle button can go. Oops, did I make it crash? Oh, I think there's a hidden if thing. So we need to take off, yeah, here we go. Let's see, dead stock to markdown. Let's take off markdown, let's take off HTML. And then let's delete this hidden thing. Boop, 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 boop. All right, that should bring it back. Nope. Okay. Is there an error in here? Oh, it failed. Window is not defined. On line 12 or 40. Oh, right. We also don't want to do the URL thing. So, window location search, right. So the way that this works right now is it defines the URL based on, defines the content based on the query string. So we want to stop doing that. Let's delete that entirely, I think. And then we'll just set it here. All right. All right, down to the bottom here. Nice, it's working. Okay, you should still be able to, oh, we can get rid of that copy URL button. Copy URL. Whoop. Actually, this whole thing, I think. Ugh. Copy URL. Drop that. I think I can drop this whole thing. Yes. Wonderful. Okay. So now you have plain text in here. It kind of flows nicely. The colors aren't too bad either. We'll have to do like some switch over to dark mode and see how that looks. Alrighty. think I'm going to drop the comment one for now. And we were using the phrase the quick brown fox. So let's go with the quick brown fox. Quick brown fox. And then let's drop the underline for now. I think we should also have it be the case that you can only, actually, we're calling these ranges, right? That was what we, as opposed to annotations. Just want to stay consistent with the language we're using in the explainer itself. Unfortunately, the quick brown fox runs off the page here, so we may want to make this wider, or do I want to optimize for, make these things smaller? I'm not sure. Right now in this one we have an italics around quick and a bold around brown. So let's make that change. That would be 10 to 14, 15. 10 to 15. Now we get brown bolded. And then italic should be 4 to 9. 4 to 9. Wonderful. So now we've got the quick brown fox appropriately represented here. Let's set that to be the case. So then we want bold is 10 to 15 and 4 to 9 for italic. Save that. And the quick brown fox is the thing. Let's go down here to the styles and remove the word plain text. Great. That's looking better. I feel like I should, from a style standpoint, I might want to remove that border, but this is looking okay for right now. And then instead of the word annotation, let's use ranges. I think that was a smart idea. And then the other thing I'd like to do is probably have this be a select so that it prevents you from adding an annotation that we don't know about. So I've got known annotations up here. I just prevented adding anything other than bold or italic. All right, this is actually already looking great. Like, I'm excited just seeing the visualizer like embedded into a narrative is really exciting. And I think we'll have time to like go back and add one of these other visuals, which will be really fun. All right, so we've got 2 minutes left. Let's go to our, oh yeah, let's make this a select box so that when you add a range, you can only make it bold or italic and not both. Remove that there. Recompute the doc, update the query. Sorry, this would be underneath where we spit out the annotations. Is this them? Yes, I think. Or no, this is these guys. Where are the inputs? Here they are. Cool. Okay. So then in this particular input annotation type, we actually want this to be a select. And trying to remember what the values would be. Oh, I think we have to do like option, isn't that the thing? Close the select here and option maybe? that the way it works? Yay. Yes, it is. Okay. And then we'd actually want to do this as, yes, each annotation types. Is it annotation types or known annotations? I think it'd be known annotations. Yeah, I'm not seeing any variable here called annotation types. I'm not sure why Copilot thought that was a good idea. All right, let's get 5 more minutes here to get this wired up. Oops. And then we'll be at a good point to take a break. Known annotations as annotation. And I think it's value equals annotation dot type. And the each there, and then make the name annotation dot type as well. Yeah, I guess. Cool. Now we have bold and italic. Awesome. It updates dynamically. Man, I really love SvelteKit. Like when you get a UI wired up, it just feels great. So yeah, now we can add a range, can make that italic, can make it 1 to, I don't know, 30, italicize the whole thing. See how it stretches across, super cool. Remove it, dynamically updates on the fly. Yeah, that's nice. That's real nice. Okay, cool. So we've got our standoff visualizer SvelteKit component that we're embedding in the article. It's now time for me to take a quick break. So I'm gonna come over here and check in this change. Article with embedded component. And it is really coming along here. Embedded component. All right, cool. All right, so we have just finished up our third Pomodoro of 4, which means that we've been at this for about 90 minutes working on this standoff explainer example and putting together a narrative structure for explaining how standoff is different from other formats. So I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and at the end of that 5-minute break, I'll be back, and hopefully we can start working on either the HTML or the Markdown visualization that show how those two examples represent rich text. So see you guys in 5. Jess. We're now in Pomodoro number 4. That means we're 90 minutes into a 2-hour work session. So I've got one more 30-minute work block ahead of me, and thanks for hanging out. So we're busy and deep in the middle of writing this explainer article for standoff-based markup. And so we've gotten well, let's go ahead and start our last 25 minutes. Timer's on the clock, and then let's see what we can get done. So far we've got this article. It's actually available now. You can go to standoff.jessmart.in/article, and it's been getting deployed automatically as I push changes up to GitHub. But right now, working with it in localhost, we've got this standoff explainer. And I was reading over it on the break just now, and I'm definitely going to take an axe to a lot of this text and really try to make it more interesting and compelling and that kind of stuff. But I want to stay in coder brain, as I was talking about earlier, and work on one of these visualizations. So we've got a couple of different visualizations that I just sort of represented as code text or code blocks here in Markdown that converted and rendered out this way that I'd like to turn into something interactive. So I'm thinking the very first one that I'd like to do is embed like an interactive Markdown renderer, basically, where you can type some Markdown and have it automatically render. So I'm wondering about how best to do this. Like, we could, let's put ourselves together another component here, and we'll put down Markdown visualizer.svelte, this guy, and put an H1 in here just to like kind of hello world, get it working. And we'll come over to our article, import this one as well. Markdown, and then down here where we have our Markdown block, I'll throw in a Markdown visualizer. Great, there it is, Markdown. So now one thing we could do here is put together like an input block with, let's see, value. Definitely welcome to have ideas from the audience here. Actually, let me grab this one. Zoop. I guess I should probably stop and think about what I'm trying to communicate here. Whoops, there's two things. So there is a input block that we could, whoops, make the class width full. So now it's full width, and I could make it from a stylistic standpoint look the same. So what am I trying to do here? We like let them type Markdown, or should we maybe have a rich text editor that would be more familiar, like a WYSIWYG rich text editor, where they can click bold and italic and then have that render to Markdown. That'd be like, basically we could drop in like a prose mirror and then only have these two buttons, like a bold and italic. And so that way they could say something, it's crazy, and then or even better, like my example, the quick brown fox, and then they could double click on this and click bold, and double click on this and click italic, and then we show the Markdown dynamically updating here. One thing I want to do is I want to stay away from line endings, like only allow them to write on a single line, and because I'm going to talk about line endings later, so I think it'd be interesting to have it work that way. So let me see, what do we think here? What do we think? So we're going to do kind of 3 of these back to back to back. We're going to do Markdown HTML and then HTML as a tree where you can kind of see the HTML tree as you edit the thing. I think we don't want to let them type raw or force them really to type raw HTML or raw Markdown. In fact, what we really set up here is that you can type this quick round fox thing, but as soon as you want to type rich text formatting like bold and italic and such, you need to represent that, like encode that data in a specific way. So yeah, I think we probably do want a little like rich text editor type thing here. So then the question becomes, do I write a really simple one or do I bring in prose mirror? And by really simple, I mean literally like the only things that would be here would be the quick round fox, and then there would be like a bold and an italic button. Maybe let's spend like 19 minutes going down that path, and if we can get away without bringing in like an entire prose mirror, that's probably going to be a win. And yeah, let's just see how that works. So I have no idea how this works. I'm guessing we would probably do like a span, maybe the quick brown fox, and make it content editable. I think that is just like this, and then yeah, now it's content editable. Whoa, I just deleted it. Let me see. Class, maybe it needs to be class equals inline block and width full min width. Well, I think width full covers it. I don't need to do a min width. So there's that. Now I can edit that. I can delete it. Great. Okay, cool. So now I've got our little like content editable thing, and then I guess I'll have a button. Oh, I'm gonna have to do selection API. Sigh. Okay. Yeah, let's just make this bold. Let me grab some of the styles from this guy. Where's my add and remove buttons? Here we go. Great, there's a bold button. And then we'll give it an on click equals make bold. All right, and then export const. All right, so I don't need an export here, just const make bold equals this. Oh, let's see. Copilot takes a swing at it. All right, Copilot thinks it's got it, so let's do that. Bold. Wow. Freaking love you, Copilot. What if I... Oh, wow, it like double bolds it. How did that work? Bold inside bold inside bold. All right, so we would want to maybe toggle bold would be the better... Maybe that'll give Copilot the right idea here. This is going to get nasty, though, for the exact reason that text editing is hard. So let's see, toggle bold. Because there's the case where if it's bold, all right, so let's see what Copilot thinks of that. I can now do this, bold it. I do that again. Range, surround contents with span. Interesting. So then what I need to do is detect whether the range already has a bold button around it or not. All right, let me see. Well, we can add a simple italic one. Oh, the interesting thing too is we need to take this particular format and so yeah, maybe I will bring in like a really simple prose mirror here to avoid having to write this because now one thing that we need to do is like make it appear as if it is bold in HTML. But the other thing we need to do is actually update a markdown data structure that shows how this would be represented in markdown. Um, all right, let's see. Sorry, MDAST is the unified guy here. And so this gives us a markdown abstract syntax tree, and we can use that for some of the parsing here. So I think probably bringing in prose mirror in a lightweight way would be a worthwhile way to try this out and see what happens. So let's look at like the simplest possible prose mirror and then see if we can kind of go from there. Let's see, because the goal here for this article is not to write every little piece of code myself necessarily, but definitely to leverage the overall ecosystem and communicate the important ideas behind standoff markup. I just noticed, by the way, that the standoff visualizer has my little experiment. That I'm going to delete that span. Don't want that hanging out over the entire article. All right, sweet. Cool, got rid of that. Yeah, so writing our own thing, probably not the best way to do it. Although let's give it a thought for a second here. The really interesting way to do this would actually, to drive home the standoff thing even further, would be to use a standoff representation, like write a tiny little editor on top of standoff that actually uses the standoff representation and then uses like @JSON to transform it into HTML and Markdown for us. And that would be pretty cool actually. And I'm already using @JSON, the @JSON library and getting like more and more familiar with it. So let's think about what that would do then. And that, because we don't need the full ergonomics of an editor. Like I'm trying to build like a really simple thing here, and bringing in prose mirror, no matter how lightweight we could make it, just feels like way too heavy. So then what we could do is, instead of creating the bold here, we actually add an @JSON annotation using the range and make an @JSON doc and then render that @JSON doc as Markdown and as HTML so that you can kind of see how would that work exactly? Yeah, there's going to be, so thinking more about that, there's going to be weirdness around getting the exact range characters within this. But I'm going to have that problem. Okay, that would be the problem if I was doing. Um, okay, so we got. I'm torn here. I mean, it basically is either lean into standoff markup and write some of the utility libraries that I would need to make this work. One of which being take the web selection API and get the offsets, which I've done before in the last couple of months. And I know from the last couple of months that it's rather painful. But probably is the more reusable way to go, because like once I have that, I can yeah, I can do some of the transformations using @JSON to show off, you know, Markdown, to show off HTML. I can actually get the tree of the um, and output that to the screen as well. Okay, so I'm looking at that as I've got like 9 minutes left in this work session, and that's biting off a fairly big, feels like a fairly big thing. Actually, you know, I already have @JSON over here, I think. In, where did I do it? Did I do it in utils? Yeah, here's my doc to @JSON doc, which takes a document format and creates those things. There's doc to HTML. So this isn't crazy. Let's like grab these two real quick and go to our Markdown visualizer. Oh, what am I doing? No, I want to use these functions, not grab them. And I'm gonna need a, how do I define a Markdown document? So here's the element. Okay, so then let doc yeah, I call it a JDoc here. Oh, okay. So I'll need this. Yeah, we'll just go for it and then see if we can get it done in time. Add import. We're gonna add one for bold. Oops. Add one for italic. I'm not gonna add the other two. Those are the only two things that are supported in the schema. Then we will, I wonder what's up with this. Should this happen in a TS file? Unexpected token. If you expect this syntax to work. Wait, what? Ah, lang equals TS is missing from up here. Thank you. What a helpful compiler error. And static schema. Oh, it could be that this is getting defined in two different places. So this, let's just call it MD document. Huh. So I might need to move this export to here and then import it. Import, what was that called? MD document. Yeah, from util. Okay, and then what's the next thing we need to do? I need to create a new doc. I think it's at the end here. Yeah. Let @JSON doc equals new MD document. And right now the content is equal to quick brown fox. I'll just hard code it for now, and in a second we'll wire it up to this span. Like we'll probably do like a bind value. let content equals big round box. Yep. Content, and then we'll need some @JSON marks. @JSON marks equals that for now. It's going to be an array of what? Annotations, I think. Annotation JSON. To pull that import in. All right. And then annotation JSON can't be empty? Really? How did I define it over here? Oh, so I forgot to make this an array type. Boop. There we go. All right, so now I can make an @JSON doc. And what I want to do here is add bold annotation to marks. So in this case, try that. Argument of type string is not assignable to annotation JSON. Pretty sure. Let's see how it's done down here. New bold is what it is. Okay. New bold. And there's that. So that should look that way, and then add the import. And then we'll still need to handle the fact that we're going to be turning these on and off. Got 3 minutes left here. Let's see how this works. What am I doing wrong here? Ah, right. It's not bind value. It is content. Okay, can now edit this. And this is going to add @JSON marks. So let's do a console log @JSON marks at the end here, just to see what happens. So click on that and click bold. Sweet, we now have a bold one. Let's try to render it as HTML. Let's see. So this would see import doc to HTML. Actually, we're trying to do doc. Wait, well, yeah, it's gonna be the content. Let's do doc to markdown first. And we'll make that here. Span. I'll call it MD content. And then we'll do an update here of MD content. Yes, doc to markdown. And here we'll define MD content as nothing for right now. So it'll be a string. @JSON doc doesn't exist. So let's pull that down to below that. Okay, let's see if this works. Looks like my things I'm passing in here are wrong. Okay. Let's just do the So MD content equals markdown render. All right, let's see how that works. All right, so now we have the MD content is nothing for now, but that's not entirely true. All right, let's take 5 more minutes to see if we can get this working. Grab that. Oops, just that right there. And drop it into that. So now I should have a quick brown fox. Great, there's our, that's gonna be our markdown content. And now I'm gonna edit this and add a bold here, and I expect to see it. Rats. Okay, that didn't do it. So why did we get back? Oh, well, let's see. Where did our range work appropriately? At JSON marks. Bold. End 15, start 10. So that looks correct. Let's do a console log of MD content. See what happened there. If I double click that and click bold. Huh. So yeah, it's definitely, my markdown renderer is not rendering out the JSON doc that I expect. Okay, well, we made a lot of progress today. I'm going to call this a good place to stop. Thanks for hanging out on Coding with Jess. It's been a little bit over 2 hours that we've been working on this now. Standoff visualizer, and you can see it at standoff.jessmart.in or check out the repo on GitHub. Working on this explainer document. I hope it's been fun. Thanks for folks who hung out, Alan, Horatio, Adam, and dropped in and said hi. That was fun. And hope to continue working on this over the next several weeks until this article represents like a really helpful resource on explaining what markdown or standoff markup is. So have a great rest of your Wednesday, and hope to see you on a Coding with Jess live stream soon.